Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fifth of our webinars brought to you by World ParaVolley. Great to see some familiar faces. Great to see some new people here as well. But as always, a reminder that this will be recorded. It will be in the posterity library forever as we continue to build this group of resources that are going to help us all to grow the game that we love so much. The four previous webinars, if you haven't watched them already, then please do. They are waiting in the library. But tonight, we move on to coach performance, and Aaron Alsop is joining us. He is a level 2 coach in sitting volleyball. He's now a coach tutor as well, a member of the World ParaVolley Coaches Commission, focused on growing the coaches pathway for beach ParaVolley. It is a great pleasure to have him here this evening. Before I introduce you properly, Aaron, just a reminder, there will be some opportunities at the end for you to speak and ask questions, but during the presentation, if you could please make sure that your microphones are muted. Not you though, Aaron. Make sure yours is open because we want to hear you. How are you? Where are you? The floor is yours.
Yeah, g'day. Thanks, Dave. And thanks again to World ParaVolley for the opportunity, especially Matt, for this invitation to be with everyone today. I'm presenting from a country called Samoa, which is in the Pacific Islands off the east coast of Australia. So really great to be with everyone this morning. I'm just going to share my screen. And if everyone's great with that, everyone should be able to see that now. We'll get started. So the purpose of this morning's session, we're going to talk a bit about holistic development coaching. So we're going to present this concept around what we do from, I guess, a holistic athlete development approach. But we are going to talk a bit about sort of three key things. So these are sort of some takeaway messages for us for this morning's session. I'm going to talk and present a little bit about what we do from the coach's perspective. So whether you're a coach developer, so this is someone who actually is developing coaches for ParaVolley in your country, or you're just in the area of where you're looking for your own sort of coaches development. One thing that we're going to talk a bit about, I guess, is the system of what we do for coach development includes coach education. And today's topic is not going to be highly technical around World ParaVolley, so around sitting volleyball or beach ParaVolley. We're going to be talking more about the generic areas of development of coaches. And we're going to present some models and frameworks that help sort of visualize a lot of the complexities that we see within coaching systems. And obviously what we're presenting is a framework that we know is very evidence-based and practically applied, but you can contextualize it into your country. So that's the perspective, I guess, we're looking at from a coaching angle. I will touch on then around coaching athletes holistically, and we'll talk a bit about that. And then at the end, I'll sort of emphasize some points of what we're looking at around what we want to see within the environment in which we coach, and also the ecological systems of where coaching fits into the bigger layer of what we do with coaching. So the first thing that I'm going to present on is what we call our coach performance model. So you'll be able to access this video and the slides, but basically it's broken down into these 6 different areas. So the 6 components of the coach performance model. And it's an ecological model, which means that it's sort of layered in terms of our system. But I will present on each of those specific areas. So let me start with the first part. Initially, we need to talk about the person, right? Everyone talks about the coach, but actually what we're looking at is what are we looking at in terms of the person? We need to have a very person-centered approach. We need to understand the individual. So when I work with developing coaches, I need to understand their strengths, their values, what's their purpose, why they like to coach. So it helps me understand the individual themselves. We believe and we recognize that coaching is the most critical relationship to the athlete other than the individual's family. And so therefore, in the coaching context, it's a really critical relationship we need to have. What we also need to understand about the person is what are their aims and goals in order to be successful, not only as a coach, as a person. And I think when we start to work with coaches or mentoring or developing coaches, getting that understanding of who they are as a person is a real critical starting point in order to develop successful and effective coaches. What we do then around that coach, as you see in the diagram on the screen, is that we create around the coach what we call a performance culture. And I'm going to touch again a little bit more on the environment later on in the presentation, but to summarize what we mean by performance culture, it's the environment in which you perform. So where is it the coach is coaching? And whether you call that the daily training environment, the performance environment, whether you sort of looking at those different elements, what we want to create around the coach is the right performance culture. What do we mean by that? It's essentially where we know that people can feel safe, they feel welcome, they feel inspired, so that we know then that they can learn, grow, and excel. And around your culture, you may have a set of values. So I've just put up there a framework of the values based on the acronym of RESPECT. What you do in your program around the coach to create that sort of value structure is really going to help shape the culture in which those coaches have to perform. What we also know about culture, essentially, it's the set of values or standards and behaviors that we expect of people that come into that environment. Then around the actual environment of the coach, the performance culture around the coaches, is we look at what we call these performance domains. So whether you've looked at the ICCE's coaching framework or you've looked at other evidence-based frameworks that talk about what are the skills and knowledge areas that coaches need. We know that coaching now is well beyond the element of technical and tactical. We need to look a lot more holistic in the way that we coach. So these 6 domains are what we believe evidence suggests that you need to develop skills and knowledge and experience in order to be a successful, effective coach. So what are you doing around your leadership skills? What do you do around performance planning and performance review? What do you do around athlete preparation? What do you do around your coaching practices? And then what do you do around that talent pathway space? So underpinning these performance domains, I'll be able to present to you in a few slides what our framework is that underpins those 6 particular areas. But different to a sports-specific coaching course, we know that's very focused on technical, tactical. We need to look a lot more holistically now in the way that we develop our coaches. Around the performance domains is that we need to look at the environments in which we're actually coaching. So within our performance environments, we have what our pathways program would be. So essentially that's where we've got coaches that are focusing on participation and pathways, where we've got mass participation, pathways where we've got athletes that are progressing into an elite pathway. Our DTE is the acronym we use for daily training environment. So what are we doing around creating the right environment where our regular daily training sessions would occur? And then the DCE, which is our competition environment. So we need to be able to support the coaches, understanding their roles and responsibilities in what we do. And I believe in the previous presenter, Nicole spoke a bit about responsibilities in some of those different areas, which I think was really cool. Then the next layer of our system around that is what are we doing to provide what we call systems intelligence? So where are we informing the environment to actually understand how to make good decisions to get the best performance or to create competitive advantage? So one of the things that we need to look at, what an acronym we use called STEPS. So what are we doing around sports training and education programs to upskill our individuals that work within those environments? So we focus a lot on what we call capacity building or competency-based training in those sort of sport education programs. Our research, innovation, and technology is another piece. We know that those three things combined together really can help inform and shape the environment in which we coach. And then the other thing we use is an acronym DIMS, which is essentially it's a data intelligence management system. Where do we actually keep and support all the repository of this data and information that actually can help us understand our athletes, understand our program, rather than it being lost in poor communication or poor storage of this sort of data and information. Is a way that we're able to create a management system to keep that together. And then the final layer to our coach performance model is what we call our systems leadership. So what are the things that are really interconnected and collectively work together in their different functional areas to make sure that the whole system is working? So one of the key things that we need to do is obviously create partnerships. We can't create successful systems for coaches just working in isolation where it's just our sport. We need to look at how do we develop partnerships. That could be through your Paralympic committee, could be through commercial partners, could be through government, could be through your high performance agencies, but those partnerships working together is a real critical piece. We obviously need a plan. You need some type of a strategic plan, operational plan, program management plan, performance enhancement plan, some type of a plan that is structuring the strategies and objectives around what you're doing for your program. Obviously, we need the right people. So we need to ensure that we're attracting the right people into our program. It's not just about the coach, but who might be your other support staff that come into your program, be it assistant coaches, technical analysts, S&C, physio, medical, team managers, whoever that may be. It's a real critical piece. But also it could be the family support person of the athlete. It could be other well-being and support staff that you may have that support the coaches as well. And then the last thing is around the profile. What are we doing as a system to help build the profile of your sport, to help build the profile of your program and the success of your program, to ensure that that then allows us to leverage that profile to look at ways to attract investment, to support your program, to acknowledge the effort of what coaches are doing within their programs, I think is a really important piece. So as an encompassing model, what you can see now there on the screen is the diagram that puts all of those 6 components of the performance model into one visual representation of what we do. So if you look at the center of the model, we've got the person who is the coach. What are we doing to understand the person and support the person? Around the coach, we've created a performance culture, which is the environment in which we perform. Then we looked at the 6 domains. So we believe that it's important that as coaches that you develop yourself in these 6 domains. Around that, we look at what are the environments in which you're actually coaching. Then we looked at the systems intelligence, and then we built it out to the system leadership. So in one visual model, we're able to represent the whole coaching system that shows the individual laid all the way out to the entire system in which that person coaches. Now, if you take notice of those 6 domains in the colored section of the center of the diagram, this slide here represents what those different domains look like in terms of a framework. So what you can see here is that we've got the 6 different domains: athlete preparation, coaching practices, talent pathways, leadership, performance planning, and then performance review. Underneath each of those different areas, we've created a definition to define what we mean by those 6 domains. And then underneath those 6 domains, what we've done is created subcategories of different dimensions that coaches can learn about in order to become a more effective, holistic coach. So at the moment, if your coaching practice, for example, is just focused on the technical, tactical area, but you don't look at some of the other general principles of coaching, this might be an opportunity for you to develop yourself further in those domains. If you look at, for example, under the talent pathways area, there's a whole range of learning about what we mean by talent identification and development to be able to understand how to put together a talent pathways program for your team or your sport. So the model itself, if I go back to the model, the 6 domains itself, this is where we actually, in this framework, have developed an education and development program to support coaches developing themselves in each of these areas. Now, if you coach at the participation level, where you're just at the grassroots level, some of these areas of the framework aren't as more of a priority than maybe others. If you're a high performance coach where you're a national coach for your country, then obviously it's important to develop yourself in these other areas. For example, performance planning and review, leadership skills, all those different areas that might be a really important learning opportunity for you as a coach. So the coach performance model and the framework go together essentially, where the visualized representation of the model shows us what we do as a whole system. The framework really breaks down now the specific areas that coaches can look at and say for themselves, okay, I'm confident in areas of my technical or tactical coaching, but maybe I need to learn better about how to do planning, or I need to learn more about well-being of my athletes. And so therefore the framework can identify some of those other opportunities for coaches to learn. Now, to support the coaches, obviously what we're looking at is how do we help develop athletes holistically as well. So very similar to the coach performance model, we have what we got for our athlete performance model. So if you notice on the screen here, on the bottom, we've got the 4 domains of what we call sport performance. The physical preparation, the mental preparation, the technical, and the tactical. Those 4 areas are very commonly understood and represented typically within coaching programs. But what we look at now is more of a holistic approach. So that the other 4 domains you see on the model here is what we call well-being and lifestyle performance. What are we doing to understand the athlete from a biopsychosocial perspective? What do we know about their beliefs and behaviors? What are we doing to develop from the personal development perspective? And then what are we looking at to support the athlete's dual career? So if I break this down, the sport performance domains, these are the 4 areas that we're very comfortable with as coaches that we see are typically presented in coach education material. We teach you technical areas, which is all about the skills of the sport. We teach you tactical areas, which is all about the strategy game plan of the sport, the systems. We teach coaches about the mental side. So we're talking about their cognitive skills, but also their mental skills of performance side of athletes. And then we look at the physical side. So whether that's your sports science, sport medicine, nutrition, strength and conditioning, anti-doping, these are the 4 domains that are very commonly taught through coach education materials. And most coaches would be comfortable with that. But these other areas are things that aren't commonly taught by coaches or support staff to athletes to ensure that they're holistically developed. So dual career, what are we doing to support the athlete's career outside of sport, whether that's schooling, whether that's business, whether that's study, whatever it may be, so that they've got a dual career. We talk about personal development. So these are areas of leadership, life skills, what's their role in the community, and understanding that identity that they have. We talk about their beliefs and behaviors. So I work across a number of different countries where their spiritual and cultural life actually shapes the values of the athletes and the coaches that we work with. And it's really important to embrace those areas. But we also talk about the environment. We also talk about their leisure activities. We know that the digital world now is playing a big factor in the well-being of people. So we look at those habits as well. And then the last one is where we look at what we call biopsychosocial. Bio meaning the body, biological body, the psychological meaning our mind. So we're talking about our mental health. We're talking about psychological well-being, and then we're talking about the social relationship piece. So knowing that athletes have got range of social environments they're interacting with and what we do around those relationships. And these are the 4 areas we call our well-being and lifestyle performance domains that complement the other sport performance domains to make sure that we're looking at the athlete as a person. And this is a big piece around coach education and coach development that isn't always taught. We taught about the sport performance domains, but we don't get to touch on these well-being and lifestyle domains. So here's a framework for the athlete performance area. It is a lot of things that we look at, but we're usually quite comfortable with these 4 areas as something that we would teach coaches typically in our coach education programs. But here's the framework of what we do for our well-being and lifestyle domains. So these areas here, the ones that I just explained, what we've got underneath each of those 4 domains are definitions to define what we mean by that. But it also covers all the subcategories of the different programs that we offer athletes to support their holistic development. So these are the main things that we want to talk about with coaches in looking at how do we embrace this more holistic approach. So just remember, we talked about the coach's framework, but the athlete's model itself talking about these 8 performance domains that we want to talk to coaches, ensuring that they take more of a holistic approach now with their coaching, not just the technical tactical approach. So last thing we'll discuss is we're just going to talk a bit about how the environment can shape both the well-being and performance. And what we believe when we look at this here is that how do we have the ability to consistently perform at an elite level while maintaining the well-being and sense of purpose? So as a coach, your philosophy may be that you really believe it's about winning. But what we also know is that we need to shape an environment where we're also looking at how the person is creating, I guess, a sense of their well-being while also pursuing performance. So for us, what we want to look at is their capacity to actually perform their best can be significantly enhanced and sustained when we look at both this well-being and performance. So what we want to understand about the athlete is your environment that you're coaching in, is it helping the athlete to feel and function well in order to be able to perform? We know that when you have high levels of well-being within athletes, that it enables them to actually perform. So it's a performance enabler. And we know that your environment that you create as a coach can also believe in both can exist. We don't just have to create an environment where it's just focused on performance. So if you look at this model here, what it demonstrates is that we can have individual athletes who are really distressed or dysfunctional, which means they've got low levels of performance and low levels of well-being. And we see coaches that have created those environments where it's very much about a win at all costs type of mentality. But unfortunately, they're not performing because of the dysfunction they have with their low levels of well-being. Then we would say someone is a high performer, but they've got a low level of well-being. So that's someone that we would say is distressed but functional. So they're able to perform, they're able to function as an athlete, but then they're quite distressed about the environment that they're working in. The other athletes are over here where there's high levels of well-being, but there's low levels of performance. They're a happy athlete, but they're just not performing for you. And that's because they're quite comfortable maybe within the environment. They're not being challenged enough. They don't get challenged to build resilience in those challenging moments. What we know is that you can actually achieve an environment where both well-being and high performance can exist. And that's what we call a flourishing environment, where it's a sustained high performance environment. And as coaches, this is what we're striving for. We want to create an environment where people can flourish, that they're not only succeeding in sport, but they're also thriving in life. And I think that's a unique balance and important factor that we need to have for both of those areas. So in and around the performance environment we spoke about before, we talked about how do we have a performance culture that's based on values? But the other frameworks that I've got here, where we talk about, for example, psychological safety. How do we make sure that people feel safe in our environments, but we can also challenge them with high levels of accountability? And that's an important piece for us to create a good environment for athletes and coaches to thrive. The other piece over here is where we talk about building resilience. So how do we build resilience where we need to create high levels of challenge, but we also then need to support? So as coaches, if we're able to challenge you to be really successful, but we can also provide you the support that you need to be successful, we know that that's creating what we call a facilitative environment. That enables you to actually produce resilience within your environment where people can perform. But like we showed in the previous slide where we talked about well-being and high performance, the well-being of the individual does not need to be compromised in order to achieve those performances. So when we look at your performance environment, we really want to see that you merge all four areas of this. We want you to create the right culture based on values. We want you to think about the psychological safety and accountability of everyone within your environment. We want you to make sure that you're building resilience through high challenge but high support. And we also want you to create an environment where both well-being and performance can be sustained and prioritized. The last consideration we want you to look at for coaches is thinking about this ecological approach. Many of you would have seen these different types of models. So the one on the left, the athlete talent development environment, where the athlete might be at the center of that particular system, and you're looking at all of the factors around the athlete that are supporting that whole ecological system for the person. The one in the middle is where we look at typically the micro systems all the way up to the macro systems, but it also contains what we call an element of time factor across the stages of development for athletes. This is a quite typical model you see for in human development. And then the third one is what we call our ecological systems theory. So I've put up the reference links for each of those three different models that people can look at to understand a bit more about ecological considerations, right, around our coaching and athlete systems. The ecological systems theory essentially shows us that what we do with the individual in the orange area here has an impact, obviously, on the environments around them in the different micro, meso, and macro systems that we have around the individuals. So when we take those sort of evidence-based systems, we look at then what we are applying into our development models. We spoke about before that there were 6 layers to our model. On the left, we've given you a diagram as a visual representation of what we do around coaching. And then on the right, what I've shown here is now what we do in terms of our system, but we The difference being between the coach and the athlete model is the different performance domains. So on the left, you'll see the coaching model where there's 6 performance domains that coaches need to specialize in. And then on the right, the athlete performance model, the only difference is that we're looking at where the athlete needs to be developed holistically across both the sport performance domains as well as the well-being lifestyle domains. So underpinning these ecological development models, we created the framework which enables us to develop the curriculum for education to teach coaches and athletes how to develop themselves holistically. And that's where we feel that this is a unique approach that goes beyond just the technical, tactical coaching education model or the typical physical, mental, technical, tactical coaching of athletes. We want to look at the coaches and athletes a lot more holistically and look at a lot more of them as persons rather than actually just treating them as a mechanism within our system. All right. So hopefully that's given an overview today of what we're doing around this sort of holistic development approach. And I would be happy to finish there. And if there is any other questions that people may have, happy to take those. So I'll hand back to Dave.
Aaron, thank you so much for that. Incredibly thorough. I've done that thing where I thought, oh, I'll ask that question, and then you've just answered it with the very, very next slide. So thank you. But I've still got a few questions, and hopefully there were a few on the floor as well. Can you just pop that last slide up again? Because I saw that it had your contact details on it, and if everybody would like to take those down.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Oh, look at that. Email, WhatsApp, and LinkedIn, the holy trinity of contacts there. So yes, if you're listening, if you're watching, if you want to take a screenshot of that, and I'm sure if you do have any questions in the future, Aaron would be happy to field them. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask a couple. Hopefully it gets everyone warmed up. You know the deal. If you've got a question, raise your hand. I am always intrigued by how coaches identify their goals and whether it's based on a coach's goals, whether they're kind of predetermined or it's all based around the players you've got or the stage that you're at. So how can a coach identify their goals, and what can they do to fix things if it feels like they're just going through the motions in a job that they've been in for a while?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question, because I think if we looked at the slide that I had up there about the coach as a person, what we realize is that the coach is an individual who also has their own coaching goals, but their own personal life goals as well. And I think it's really important that when we're talking to coaches about the sort of outcome goals that they might be chasing for their program, but they're also working on individual goals which could relate to, say, their learning. So, for example, if a coach is wanting to learn more about their interpersonal skills, they want to learn more about their leadership skills, that doesn't really have a direct correlation to the coaching environment or the coaching role that they may have at that time. That coach may leave a program and go to a new program, but they still aspire to learn about those individual goals of leadership or personal development, communication skills. So I think it's important, the process that we do go through with coaches when we create what's called their individual coach performance plan is where we have those conversations in relationship to what are some of those personal goals that just relate to you as a person and you as a coach, no matter what program or environment you're in. And I think when you start to have those type of conversations, it helps you separate out what is conditional to the sport or the team that they're working with at the time versus what is it individually that they just want to learn about from a personal perspective. So I do think it is important to have those conversations where it's okay to not talk about, let's just put volleyball aside for a second and let's just talk about you as a person. And I think the process that we go through around that helps them unpack a little bit deeper in what they mean by that particular thing. I do think the other thing about goal setting is that we set goals at the beginning of the season and we don't review it often enough. We sort of wait till the end of the year and forget, oh, we did that at the beginning. Let's have a look at that. Whereby we believe that, like learning, goal setting and goal review monitoring is an ongoing process. So it should be something that we continue with.
With that in mind, then, have you got any tips for judging an environment and getting a feel for it? I know you mentioned there maybe sitting down with individuals and thrashing it out that way, but in terms of the bigger group, have you got any advice with that?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I presented on there. One is we look at the performance culture. So when we go into programs, I go to different countries, I go to different sporting organizations. We evaluate the culture within the environment. And typically what we look for is what are the actions and behaviors or standards that we see within this environment that usually is shaped by a set of values that the organization is trying to implement. That's usually the first thing that we would look at. So we don't have to ask people what their values are, because we should be able to see that through the actions, behaviors, and standards of the individuals working within that program. So if this coach says to me, I really believe in an athlete-centered approach, but yet in their coaching environment, the coach is directing and controlling everything, then they're not actually living that value that they want to uphold. The other thing about the environment and the culture I presented on before was the 4 things around psychological safety, building resilience, and also having well-being complementing high performance. We believe that it's important for us to observe those type of behaviors in place in order for us to have a really positive environment to support both the coach and the athlete.
Amazing. Quack has asked a question in the chat box. Firstly, says, thank you for the presentation. A really comprehensive overview of coach education. One thing that I noticed was the areas identified in coach performance framework. Is there a tool out there where coaches can keep track of their progress for the framework? Some coach reflective tools come to mind, but perhaps I wonder if you may know of such a tool that can systematically track against the framework.
Yeah, so the work I did in developing the model and the framework, underpinning all of that is what we have in terms of our measurement tools that we use. So as an individual, let's say that I'm working with coach, one particular coach, we'll actually do a training needs analysis and develop their coaching performance plan based on that framework. And that helps the coach then identify the areas of priority that they want to work on. And the way that we develop the measurement tool is being able to track their progression and improvement on those particular domains as we work through their learning plan. So underpinning that, we have that tool which enables us to review with the coaches, typically every 3 to 6 months, how they're progressing with their own learning and professional development against that original plan. So yeah, really good question. But that's why we created that system in enabling us to monitor the development and progression of the coach.
Oh, yeah. Amazing. I hope that answers the question for you, Quack. Robin, I was about to ask you to unmute and ask it yourself, Robin, because it's been great to have your contributions every week. But I see you don't want to wake up your kids, and I don't blame you. So Robin says, hi, Aaron. I think the holistic approach sounds great. However, it is also a lot of stuff to master. I can imagine that many coaches, especially at club level, simply don't have the time to focus on these aspects and skills. So how do you know what to focus on if you can't do them all?
Yeah. So that's the complexity of coaching, right? And I think the demand that's been put on coaches now, I agree with what Robin's saying, is we're no longer just a technical expert. We're actually required to manage a whole program, manage people. And I think The challenge with it is that if we don't support the coaches in learning all of these different areas, then there is gaps within their program, which could be the reason that they're not performing or not able to sustain performance. But what we do know is that we have to prioritize certain areas based on what the individual coach's needs are. But the second thing is, what does the environment need? So we've gone into programs with coaches whereby the coach really wants to work on, say, introducing technology from a performance analysis perspective, where they want to use this stuff to help with their technical coaching. But what we observe within the environment is that the athletes actually need better leadership from the coach. And so therefore it's a conversation with that particular coach, particularly at club level where they're very time poor, to say to the coach, would you agree through observation that maybe these other areas are priority right now for your particular program or for your particular team that you're working with, whereby we need to maybe address these particular priorities first to then build in the technology stuff or your other areas that you want to look at. So we do what we call scaffolding. So we don't just throw everything at the coach straight away and make them look at 50 priorities. We try to only work on 3 to 5 maximum at a time. But what we do know is that we need to have an honest conversation with them. And this is part of our role as a coach developer, is getting their perspective of what they want to do, which allows them to self-determine, but also through observation, what we can see to say, could we agree that maybe we need to work on this one while you also work on those 1 or 2 other ones? And so there is no black and white for every individual. It's very specific, very contextualized to the person, but also the program that they're working at. But what I do know is that the best coaches do have a lot of understanding in those sort of generic areas rather than becoming specialists, or they bring in assistant coaches or other people who are the specialists in those areas to help supplement the gaps in their own learning that they don't have. Great question, Ron. Thank you.
It is a great question, a great answer as well. You're talking there about sort of head coaches being able to bring assistants in, but what if you're a new coach working at grassroots level? What are the things that you should really be concentrating on first? How do you prioritize what's really important?
Yeah, I think everyone would have opinions on that. And it depends on what sport you're working into. Like, I know some sports, it's very dominant around, you've got to know your technical, tactical component. And I understand that. But I also know that if the coach doesn't have good communication skills, some, at least some competency around planning and organizational skills, some of that vision and leadership type sort of skills, I think that the technical, tactical stuff isn't as relevant to their athlete if they can see that the coach isn't sort of developed in some of those other areas. So I do believe that it's a balance. I do believe that it's sort of like 2 oars in a boat. If you just got 1 oar in a boat and you're just doing technical, tactical coaching all the time, but you're neglecting the other areas, the other oar of the boat, you're just going to go around in circles and you're probably not going to progress your program or your environment or your athlete. So to summarize my answer, I would suggest that it's important that you look at what are priority areas that actually have an influence over everything else. So give me an example. You're really good technically, tactically, but you're so poor in your leadership, communication, time management, then the technical, tactical stuff is not going to become a priority to your athletes when they can see that these other areas are actually affecting your ability to coach. Again, that's very individualistic, but I do believe the generic principles of coaching practices are just as equally important as the technical, tactical piece. The bottom line is ultimately we are there to also do no harm. So it's ensuring that you're creating a safe, fun, welcoming environment so that you can create a good learning environment for your athletes, I think is a really good place to start.
Amazing. Thank you. And hopefully one day those two oars will become a big, powerful motor and it'll be plain sailing. Right then, I've asked a lot of questions. Nobody has spoken yet. Oh, Quock's back in. Thank you for the response to the query about a tool. I suppose the complexity and diverse issues of coach development is that it's more of an art rather than an exact science. Yet, I'd like to delve a bit more and challenge this idea. Hence, could you elaborate or imagine a ubiquitous tool and describe what it looks like? Or feel free to say it isn't possible or plausible.
Yeah, I 100% agree that there's art and science in coaching. Where does the science come in? Well, the science is through what we know around learning. We know there's science that teaches us around athlete development. We know there's science that teaches us around data and technology. But the art piece is where it comes into what we know around leadership, what we know around people, and what we know around creating the right values and culture. So I do agree that it's both. The tool that we developed is a generic tool that any coach can use, but it's based on the individual's needs, based on the individual person, but also the individual environment that that coach is working in. So therefore, the document that we created is very contextualized and bespoke to the individual so that we're able to capture those 6 domains for the coach's development, but also take into, with respect to the cultural context that that coach is working in. So we've done that now with literally hundreds of coaches across 36 different sports. So we've found that the tool is quite generic enough that it is able to be applied to any of those environments. So, yeah, really good question.
We've got another one here, and this is from Ifet. Quite a long one as well. Bear with me.
Sure.
Thank you once again, Aaron, for your clear and well-structured presentation of coach development model. Coming from a high-performance system and leading a national team in sitting volleyball, I'm particularly interested in how coach performance is evaluated within your framework, and what specific mechanisms do you recommend for tracking development across areas such as leadership skills, performance planning, or athlete well-being support? Additionally, how do you tailor the educational process across different levels, from grassroots coaches to national team selectors, to ensure it remains relevant and responsive to the real-world demands of coaching practice?
Okay. So, Dave, if you can help me, I'll go through the first part of that question because that's an excellent question.
Yes.
May I ask what country is this coach from?
I should know this. Hang on, I'm going to rack my brain. Ifet, before I get there,
I'll get onto the question.
Say, are you? Am I going to say Bosnia and Herzegovina and get in trouble here? Either way.
Okay. So the first part
yes,
of the question is.
Good evening. Yep. Good evening. I'm Ifet Mahmutovic, coaching in Bosnia and Herzegovina national team.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Look, the first part to the question is around how do we evaluate coaches' performance? So we do need to do that in a more 360 perspective. So what that means is, how does the coach perform in terms of their role and responsibilities, say, within the daily training environment? How does that coach perform when it comes to competition environment? How does that coach perform in terms of the overall program management? How does that coach perform from the athlete's perspective? So we do surveys with the athletes to evaluate that perspective. How does that coach perform within the organization? So we speak to people that work around the program, could be administrators, other support staff. And then how does that coach fit within the cultural context of the program itself? So you need to take a very sort of 360-degree view of how the coach is performing, but also then we evaluate the coach performance in terms of the individual. So is this individual open to feedback, open to learning, open to mentoring, open to professional development? Those key factors we look at when we do what we call a 360-degree review. The second part to your question, specifically in the areas that we can track and develop their knowledge and skills, we use an acronym called DESK, DESK. What's their desire, experience, skills, and knowledge? So learning those different domains, we evaluated in our measurement tool, whereby we have outcome measures that attach to the learnings that they've done in those particular areas. When it comes to the last part of your question, you talked about tailoring the education process. It's education and development. So education meaning that we need to run face-to-face, online type workshops. It could be one-on-one learning through coach observations in the training environment. But we also then would do development work where the mentoring piece or the facilitated learning comes in from working with other peers of other coaches. So we've been able to learn how to, and we're getting better at developing ways to tailor that to different cultural contexts. So some of the work that I'm doing in other countries where, you know, there's different faith, different cultures, different complexities. One country I worked in had 700 languages and many different tribal cultures and value systems. So how do we take those complexities as well to merge it all together? So I think what we've had to learn to do is take our framework and just learn about how do we culturally apply that to every context. Some people don't like lecture style environments. They love more practical learning, more kinesthetic learning. So we've had to learn how to adapt those things. But for your country specifically, we'd be happy to chat about how that may work based on your experiences as well.
Great question. Great question. Right then, we've got time for one more? Has anyone else got a question? Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I can say that's exactly why we are the best in the world. Yeah, not far off at all. Any more questions? Oh, they've gone quiet on you, Aaron. They might be letting you off the hook here.
It's good.
Yeah, well, you have been incredibly thorough. Right then, I think we should call it there. Thank you so much for joining us, particularly those who have been on every single one of these for the last 5 weeks. It is the morning where Aaron is in Samoa. It is the evening where I am in London. And I think given some of the time zones we're across here, you've been setting alarms at all kinds of times of the day to join us. And it's greatly appreciated. If there is anything that you want to catch up on, as I've said previously, all of the webinars are recorded and are available, and all of our brilliant speakers, Aaron included, have offered up their contact details. So if you've got any questions as you continue to develop in this brilliant game that we love so much, please do get in touch with them, ask them anything, and they'll do their best to help you grow. As has become customary, Aaron, I will thank you once more. This has been brilliant. And leave the last word to you to say goodbye to everyone. The floor is yours once more.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Look, just again want to thank Matt, World ParaVolley, for the opportunity to support this. One of my mentors, Robin, is on there. Got to meet Robin last year, and Lorenzo and a few other people that I really appreciate their support. The one message I would like to just share is that we are looking to expand on the coaching opportunities for beach ParaVolley as well. We are really trying to look at growing the game, growing the opportunity besides sitting ParaVolley. We want to include beach ParaVolley. We'd love to see beach ParaVolley at the Paralympics in the future. Our aim is to get into 2032. We are developing now some coaching resources, which will eventually become coaching courses for you to learn about beach ParaVolley. So if it's something that your country is interested in, please reach out. We're very interested to look at ways in which we can expand both disciplines of the game. So we love sitting volleyball. It's an amazing sport, but if there's an opportunity for us to complement both disciplines, we're interested in anyone that would love to be part of this project as we move forward. So thanks again. Please reach out if you've got any questions. Appreciate everyone's time today. It was great. Thank you.